The Bible Study Podcast, episode 221. Today, the Bible Study Podcast continues the study of freedom. Welcome to the Bible Study Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. We're going to go back and look at some ground that we've tread not that long ago in the Bible Study Podcast as we go back and look at the children of Israel. We dealt with the children of Israel not that long ago when we were dealing with the theme of the wilderness. And so we talked about them in episode 210, which was part 3 in a study on the wilderness, and we talked about the 40 years that they spent in the wilderness. And so let's go back and look at that. The whole story starts here in Exodus 3. I'm going to skip Exodus 1 through 2, where we learn that things are bad for the children of Israel. They have become slaves in Egypt. Remember, they went to Egypt because they were being saved from the famine through Joseph. Joseph, he of the coat of many colors, who was sent ahead. His brothers thought they were selling him into slavery to get rid of him, and instead they end up coming to him, little beknownst to them, to beg for food when things are going bad. And he says, God sent me ahead so that we could save you. And so they end up in Egypt, they get numerous, and they get so numerous that basically one of the pharaohs decides that if something isn't done about them, if something isn't done about this pest control, this population control problem with these Hebrews, then they're going to have a problem, because when an enemy comes, the Hebrews could align with an enemy and there'd be an internal revolt. And so they become slaves. In Exodus 3, Moses gets drawn into the problem because he runs into a burning bush. And the Lord says, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them out of that land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the home of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. And now the cry of Israelites has reached me, and I have seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing them. So now go. I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. So, and again, Moses had lots of excuses, but it's clear that God's goal when he sent Moses back to Egypt was that Moses was going to bring to the people of Israel freedom. Freedom from the slavery under Egyptians, freedom from the suffering that they were suffering at the hand of the Egyptians. So with me so far. Okay, so Moses goes back. Remember, there was staffs and snakes and blood and gnats and flies and frogs and all sorts of different plagues that culminate in the plague of Passover, the killing of the firstborn. And finally, in that moment, Pharaoh relents, and the people of Israel are not just allowed to leave, they're practically thrown out of Egypt. And sure, the Pharaoh changes his mind at some point and tries to go after him. That doesn't work out so well for Pharaoh. It works out fine for the people of Israel. At this point, how many people has God brought freedom? How many people, through Moses, through Aaron, through these 10 plagues that he sends, how many of the people of Israel has he saved from slavery and freed? Well, the answer is all of them, right? Tens of thousands of them are now no longer slaves, but they're free. But what do we mean by free? Now, they were slaves. They had a hard time. God says he heard their cries of anguish. So this is a situation that they found themselves in, slaves. And they wanted to be free. So God made them free. So everybody's happy, right? But we quickly run into the fact that God's definition of freedom and their definition of freedom may not be the same thing. What is the first thing that God does after they're free? They defeats the Egyptians, they celebrate, then they go to Mount Sinai. And what happens at Mount Sinai? skipping over a bit that there's already complaining even before they get to Sinai. They're complaining they don't have food, they're sent manna. They're complaining they don't have water, they're given water from the rock. But they finally get to Mount Sinai, and they get this encounter with God. Then Moses went up to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain and said, "This is what you are to say to the descendants of Jacob, and what you are to tell the people of Israel. You yourselves have seen what I did in Egypt, and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all the nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words you are to speak to the Israelites." So Moses went back and summoned the elders of the people and set before them all the words of the Lord had commanded him to speak. The people all responded together, "We will do everything the Lord has said." So Moses brought the answer back to the Lord. So their definition of freedom is not being slaves. With me so far? God's definition of freedom is they will be his treasured possessions. They will be a kingdom of priests, a holy nation. They will not be in bondage to the Egyptians. But he does almost immediately start giving them a series of rules to live by. The 10 Commandments. And while Moses is up getting some more laws, some more commandments, we actually have the first rebellion. The first point where they go from actively complaining about their situation, that this freedom that they have gotten is not the freedom they were looking for, but they actually go and they make another god. So here they say, "We will fully keep your covenant," and very soon they break it. We haven't even left Sinai. This whole trip from Egypt to the Promised Land takes about a year. But this whole trip from being slaves to being the people of Israel, to being God's people, a kingdom of priests and holy nations, takes a generation. Again, the question, how many people did God save from Egypt? A whole country. How many of those entered into the Promised Land? Of the adults, of those of the age of accountability and older, 2. Joshua and Caleb. And all of the rest of them died in the wilderness. They died free in the wilderness. Now that wasn't the kind of freedom they had in mind. But God's freedom here was free to be something. It wasn't freedom so that no one has to tell you what to do anymore. It was, I have a plan for you. I have a desire to see you fulfill that plan. And the people of Israel, it's a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Remember, priest, again, is that word that is someone who comes in between, the bridge, the person who joins people. So a holy nation, I intend to use you in and amongst all of the nations. But the problem we have is that this people, while free from being slaves, haven't left Egypt completely. They have left it physically, but they very quickly take their gold and their jewelry and try and recreate some of the gods of Egypt. It was relatively simple, as we talked about in the episode on the wilderness, to get the people of Israel out of Egypt. What proved to be a much more difficult struggle was to get Egypt out of the people of Israel. That change took a generation and cost countless lives as people fell by the wayside who were not allowed to go into the Promised Land because they lost faith and they lost obedience to God. God desires for us to be free, but not free in the sense of free of all responsibility, not free in the sense of now you can do whatever you like. Free from bondage, certainly. As we talked about last time, Jesus said, whoever sins is a slave to sin. But if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed. So free from that bondage that we find ourselves in, where we have no will and we have no freedom. But yet not free of responsibility and not free of this vision that God has for us. God's freedom is freedom to be something. And I think that's true with us also. When Jesus talks about freedom and he says, the Son sets you free, I believe that Jesus is saying that we are freed to be something. That God has a plan for us, as he had a plan for the children of Israel. And that faithfulness to that plan and faithfulness to God leads us to this place prepared. And that unfaithfulness can find us free, but in the wilderness, having fallen back into the bondage of our former life as the people of Israel did. With that, we're going to end this episode of the Bible Study Podcast. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment at thebiblestudypodcast.com or drop me an email to host@thebiblestudypodcast.com. You can also follow me on Twitter at Chris2X. And thanks so much for listening.
Well, the physician comes in and tells this lovely couple, hey, your son's not going to make it. But there's a young girl here in the hospital who just delivered a baby girl and she's given her up. She's going to leave her here. Do you want her instead?
That was chart topper Ryan Stevenson sharing a personal testimony on The Walk, a podcast for worshipers. Join us weekly to hear artists, songwriters, worship leaders, filmmakers, and other creatives tell their stories in the form of a devotional. The Walk can be found on lifeaudio.com or your favorite podcast platform.